Late Night Health continues. The insane Daryl Wayne over there. I'm over here. I'm Mark Alyn. Our guest is none other than Douglas Mark Abrams. He spells his name correctly with a K. And he is the moderator of the Book of Joy by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. There is a picture that I referenced as we were going into our break where I guess Desmond Tutu is kind of doing a little bit of a dance there, and he's got the Dalai Lama doing it too. The Dalai Lama is not supposed to dance because of his vows. Is that true?
That's right. So we were in Dharamsala, India for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday celebrations, or leading up to them, and we were able to throw a little birthday party for him, a little surprise birthday party that ended up having 2,500 people at it.
Just a little surprise gathering.
It was this incredibly moving birthday party where we were at the Tibetan children's village, and this amazing school where the kids come to be educated by the Dalai Lama because they can't get a Tibetan education in Tibet, and their parents send them as young as 5 over these mountain passes with guides, knowing that they may not see them again for 13 years, if ever. And these kids were sharing their stories, and then we came out, and all of the kids were around, and their teachers and people from the community. There was a band that was playing We Are the World, and the Dalai Lama, as a Buddhist monk, is not supposed to dance, but Archbishop Tutu, his friend, was having none of it. He was not going to let him sit out the party. And so the Archbishop Tutu has this amazing kind of boogie. He's all elbows. He's got a kind of Marvin Gaye sway.
Yeah.
And, he's just got some fantastic moves. And so he gets the Dalai Lama up, and the Dalai Lama looked about as comfortable as I looked at my first junior high school dance. But he managed to do a little shuffle, a little shimmy, a little jazz hands, and it was just fantastic to see the joy that he was having, that the two of them were having as they were dancing together and laughing together and teasing. And the Dalai Lama even tickled Archbishop Tutu's chin, just amazing.
In today's 21st century, we've got all kinds of trouble and problems, from economics to politics to craziness, the catastrophe in Vegas, the hurricanes in Florida and Texas, and there are more. Do we have a right to want to be joyful in spite of all the junk? I'll even say crap that's going on in the world that's hitting us every day.
Well, it's a really great question, and actually the question we got most from the 1,000 people who wrote in with questions, during the 3 days before we met, the most asked question was, how can we live with joy in a world so filled with suffering? And I think we almost feel embarrassed when we're feeling joyful when there's so much pain in our world. But what they remind us is several things. One, that it helps no one for us to be miserable. And that, in fact, when we're joyful, that means we're not in fear, anger, and sadness in a way that we become this kind of pool of joy and equanimity that they are. And Archbishop Tutu was at a refugee camp in Sudan, one of the most despairing places in the world, and he actually stepped into a crowd of refugees and began to sing, and the refugees began to sing, and he began to dance, and they began to dance. And these people who didn't know where their next meal was coming from and whether they were going to be safe that night were able to experience joy because he was able to choose joy, which didn't mean that he wasn't heartbroken by the pain and suffering that they were experiencing. And I think the other thing that they told us is that news is news because it's the aberration. We look at the news and we think, wow, there's not much hope for humanity, as the Dalai Lama said, because it looks like the world is so bleak and people are doing these horrible things and there's just so much suffering and trauma. But when we recognize that that's just a fraction of what's happening on this world, the people who are doing what was done in Las Vegas are so few on our planet compared to the 7 billion people who are actually going about their day, loving their children, loving their neighbors, helping one another. That's what really is the nature of human life. And these other expressions, when our anger and our hatred get out of sorts, it's not the whole picture. And so when they gave us in the Book of Joy these 8 pillars, the first pillar is perspective, and recognizing that the heartache and the heartache that we experience in our own lives and that we witness in the world is only part of the picture. And when we step back and have a wider perspective, we can see it in its proper place and actually be more effective in addressing it.
Doug, thank you very much for your time. And when you're back home in California, give us a call and we'll do more of this. This was a great conversation. My takeaway for the book is that joy is something you choose. You choose to be miserable, or you can choose to be joyful. And I encourage you to pick up the Book of Joy and get the companion journal. I think it's just really fantastic. The Book of Joy by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, coordinated by Douglas Abrams, our guest. Doug, thank you very much. Look forward to our next chat. Coming up next, we've got Bob Arnott. We're going to talk about coffee, and we're going to talk about pain with Bob as Late Night Health continues. Join us at latenighthealth.com.